I'll give a brief introduction before we start. My name is Dojimos. It's kind of like my two favorite projects since I've been in crypto. It's Dogecoin and Cosmos. So, been pretty active member of the Cosmos community, and I'm here to talk about Everett. So let's get started right away, and here we go. We'll keep it in really simple terms so all of you can understand this pretty easily. So we have Bob, and Bob has a token, but Bob wants more tokens like the rest of us. And typically, I think if you want more tokens, you could just go buy more, but the condition here is that Bob doesn't have any fiat. So what does Bob do when he has a token but wants more tokens, right? But he doesn't have fiat to buy it, so. Okay, so Bob shouldn't be such a gambler and he should have some reserves of fiat, but obviously let's say this is, Bob is a true hodler and he's gonna keep his tokens, he's not gonna go into any fiat, right? So, what's Bob gonna do? He can trade. Most of us I think has at least traded once, has experience in trading, but the problem is that trading's hard. XRP escrow gets unlocked and people are like, oh shit, the token price is gonna go down, and Craig will sell his million BTCs, and Trump tweets about Bitcoin and how awful it is. Trading's hard to manage and crypto is very volatile, I'm sure all of you guys know. So what's the solution for that? Is having DeFi, right? So there's a ton of DeFi applications that are being built and that have been built, and I'm so glad to see traction in the DeFi space with MakerDAO, Compound, Uniswap. So obviously, I personally believe that this space is going to grow massively, and it already has, just by the amount of ETH tokens that have been locked up in DeFi. So in a proof of work setting, DeFi is probably your best bet at safely accruing interest on your tokens. And I say safely with an asterisk because obviously, there's always that risk of, the smart contract blowing up or some unknown event of like the ETH price crashing and you have to liquidate your CDPs. But in general, I think proof of work in a proof of work setting, DeFi does pretty good job of compounding your interest. But when we move to a proof of stake settings, the foundation actually changes quite a bit, and let's see what happens. So we have proof of stake and proof of work right here. Seem all friendly and similar and together. And we have the central interest rate. And that's a big problem that we have to address that I don't think that people have been addressing so much so far, where it's fundamentally different in a proof of stake settings than a proof of work setting. So yeah, what is a central interest rate? I think staking reward is a form of central interest rate where the protocol sets a protocol-wide interest. Great, thank you. This one's not working either. And now we just went offline. So yeah, let me go ahead and explain how staking rate becomes a form of central interest rate is because staking reward is a form of protocol-wide interest rate that anyone can join and stake their tokens into the protocol and receive a set number of rewards. That is one form of central interest rate that exists on proof of stake that did not exist on proof of work, because in proof of work settings, you had to mine to create new tokens. But in proof of work settings, token holders get to have new tokens. So that brings trade-offs when DeFi comes into the proof of stake setting that didn't exist in a proof of work setting. And I broke it down into three major trade-offs. And first one is the liquidity trade-off. Second one is the interchange trade-off, and the third one is the security trade-offs. So let's go ahead and get started on the liquidity trade-offs. So for Cosmos, I think it's one of the biggest proof of stake networks that exist, and Right now, I think it's about 70% of tokens that are being locked into proof of stake. And at that rate, Cosmos as a protocol offers you about 10% APR. But what happens when you have Compound that exist within the Cosmos protocol that offers you interest rates that are way lower than what the staking rewards are? So for example, right now, this is an example. I think I got it from Compound two days ago on Ether. So I'm guessing it won't be the same on Cosmos, but it's just kind of a figurative number to see where things are right now. So if you lend DAI, you're expected to earn about 8.43% a year. And when you're lending ETH, it gets even way lower into the 0.03% APR. But still, there are like millions of tokens being locked because you can't really make more tokens in the proof of work setting, right? But if something like that existed on Cosmos, token holders are simply incentivized to put their money into the staking mechanism rather than DeFi, which means there will be way less liquidity in a DeFi application, and all the tokens will be locked up into staking. So this is what happens, right? You have all these DeFi protocols that are building applications on top of the network, yet all the token holders are going to staking and not pulling their money into DeFi. And next point. So low liquidity for DeFi means really low usability. Obviously, for DeFi to scale, you need to have a big pool of money that's available for people to loan out and take out loans with. But when all the tokens are locked up in staking, it brings really bad DeFi usability. And every DeFi application is unique and special in their own way, right? So, even Ethereum on 0.03% is pretty cool. Like the fact that you can do that. But in a proof of stake setting, that's likely not going to happen. So there's that like ASPCA, you can have that like Sarah McLachlan song in your head. And so yeah. And let's move on to the second point about interchain trade-offs, right? So we're gonna get interoperability pretty soon. It's not here yet, I don't think completely, but I think there's the big names such as Polkadot and Cosmos that are building interoperability protocols that aims to connect all these blockchains together. But what happens when that happens on a proof of stake network it's kind of weird. So for example, let's consider that this Ethereum network is an ETH 2.0 network. And you have an ETH 2.0 token, and you transfer that into the Cosmos network using their interoperability protocol. Because Ryan Sean Adams always says ETH is money, so maybe you want to use ETH in your Cosmos network as collateral or something. But that's besides the point. But what happens is that when you have ETH 2.0 tokens on the Ethereum 2.0 network, you can accrue interest on that. But once you move that into a Cosmos network, because the token is living on a blockchain that's not native, you can't stake those ETH 2.0 tokens, which means people will likely be incentivized to keep their tokens in the ETH 2.0 native network rather than moving it interchain, because you'd probably be able to stake that and earn at least 4 or 5% interest every year. But once you move that on the interchain, you can't accrue interest on that. So that's another big problem. So you're trading off staking rewards for the ability to do interchain transfers. And that means token holders are just going to stake their tokens rather than moving it on the interchain. And lastly, there's security trade-offs, because the amount staked directly correlates to proof of stake security. That's just a fundamental basis for all proof of stake networks. But for example, if a DeFi protocol offers you something like 16.3% APR, and let's just assume that its code is fairly safe, there's very low risk of it blowing up, what happens is that if that DeFi A accepts bATOMs, which is the staking token of Cosmos Hub, people will likely just pull their money into this DeFi application, which wouldn't be a problem on a proof of work network because security depends on the hash rate and people mining. But on a proof of stake setting, that means less people are likely to stake their tokens to increase network security. And that's a big problem because then now you have DeFi protocols that are competing with the base layer for security and DeFi wanting to give you, provide liquidity for its users. So this is what happens then. Less tokens staked, more tokens in DeFi, and that means less security guarantees for the proof of stake network. So if a DeFi protocols offer higher interest rates than the staking rewards, the incentives are skewed towards the DeFi applications, and it will likely lead to people who have staked their tokens to unbond, which leads to lesser security guarantees and in pursuit of higher profits. But obviously, in a decentralized in a decentralized network, financial incentives are likely the strongest one that exists to that you can guarantee that people will follow. So that's another big problem. So obviously, this is what happens. And besides those three major points, I wrote down just a couple of other smaller points. Low amount of liquid tokens. These means tokens that are not staked, means high price volatility because there's very little in circulation. It's more prone to manipulations. And when you have highly volatile markets, whether it's bear or bull, people will likely unstake. So for example, you have tokens staked into Cosmos and you see, the price just went up like 40% and you think it's gonna go back down. You're likely just gonna unstake and sell and buy it later. And in a prolonged bear market, it's the same thing. When you think the price is gonna keep going down, you want to unbond and sell your tokens. And if you're interested in the network, you just rather buy it at a later date. Token price discovery is purely led by non-skin in the game tokens. And what I mean by that is people who have skin in the game will likely stake their tokens into the main protocol. And all the tokens that are being traded and being used as part of price discovery for that token itself are likely the tokens that are unbonded, which are held by people who have less skin in the game into that protocol. Yeah, and there's not a really good way to hedge positions, which is pretty similar to the first 2 points, and etc. So what Everett does is trying to liquefy these staking positions. And what do we mean by liquefy staking positions? Is creating something called bATOMs. And this isn't the case for Cosmos Hub. For atoms, we're gonna use the staking position of the holder to create a shadow token of the Cosmos atom. And bATOMs are fully decentralized and transparent, fully collateralized, fungible, and it maintains a one-to-one price peg to the atom, which is the native asset. So we'll go into one of these points one by one. So what do I mean by decentralized and transparent? So what we're trying to build is called the Everett Zone, and which is a blockchain, because Cosmos is like an internet of blockchains. Each applications are ideally having its own blockchain. So we're creating a blockchain that is connected to the Cosmos Hub using the Cosmos IBC protocol. And what that means is that our zone, we don't control our own zone. It's gonna be run by a set of validators, by their principle, and it follows very similar security guarantees as Cosmos Hub. And what do we mean by fully collateralized? That means there's always equal or more amount of staked atoms that backs every bATOM. And because there's something called slashing that exists, so if a validator does something malicious within the network, the protocol automatically slashes a portion of their delegated atoms as a punishment for their malicious behavior. So we have to account for events such as that happening. So we're setting a 10% collateral for potential validator slashing. And if positions fall below that collateral threshold, we're just gonna automatically liquidate. And if you're curious about our thoughts on how we want to do that, feel free to speak to me afterwards. And it's fungible. So there was this idea called validator vouchers that came up, I think, a few months ago by the Chorus One team, who are really great validators and really dedicated to the Cosmos ecosystem. But what they wanted to do is also create liquid staking assets, but one that is linked to each validator. And there are about 100 validators. So for example, if you have a Chorus One validator voucher, it likely will maintain the same price as like a Certus 1 voucher. And that's a big problem because then you have to account for 100 different validator vouchers trading at different levels, which means low liquidity, low usability, and we just don't want to do that. So this means when you have a bATOM, it accounts for the entire network's atom positions. And lastly, one-to-one price peg. bATOMs are one-to-one price peg to the staking token, in this case the atom. And it has instant one-way arbitrage going from atoms to bATOMs, because if you have atoms and you see that bATOMs are trading for higher than what atoms are, you can essentially just create a staking position, collateralize it, and create bATOMs, sell it. And that's just a very instant arbitrage opportunity. And going the other way, there's a 21-day locking period for any staking positions that are wanting to unstake. So I think the market will account for how much of a price difference where that bATOM and atom unstaking period will account for. So why do we create bATOMs, right? Like, this is all cool, but doesn't mean anything if you can't really use it. So we're gonna address these three things that we mentioned earlier and how bATOMs solve these three problems. So let's go back to Bob. And Bob has tokens, and Bob wants to use his tokens in DeFi. How does having bATOMs solve the issue of security and liquidity? Essentially what bATOMs are shadow tokens of the collateralized staking position. So it means that Bob could essentially stake his token, still receive staking rewards, and create bATOMs, which are shadow tokens. In simple terms, it's probably something like creating a CDP where the result is not DAI. It's like a bATOM, and your collateral isn't ETH, but it's a staked atom position. And because we're not following like a dollar price peg, it's way easier to arbitrage and account for price differences. Can we go back to the back? Yeah. So essentially, he could create bATOMs and use those tokens into DeFi applications. And because bATOMs will likely maintain a very close one-to-one peg to atoms, all the DeFi applications won't have any liquidity problem because it essentially unlocks these tokens that were staked into the protocol. And from the Cosmos side, there won't be any security issues because people can use bATOMs into DeFi, they can just keep their tokens staked into the Cosmos hub. And for Bob, that means he gets staking rewards. If he put his money into Compound, he can get interest on that. And if he's providing liquidity on Uniswap, he can also get rewarded for that. So when you have bATOMs, you can have network security and provide liquidity to all these DeFi applications. And let's go back to Bob again. He has tokens. And this is for interchain transfers. So when you have an interchain transfer of this native token to the other foreign blockchain, you can essentially just lock up your ETH 2.0 into an Everett zone that uses the ETH 2.0 staking as a collateral and create these shadow token Ethereum that you can also transfer to the other network. And you won't lose out on the opportunity cost of staking rewards while having a token that very closely mimics the value characteristics of the native token itself. So that solves a lot of the interchain like token movement velocity issues without sacrificing any of the security issues on the native chain. So this is just kind of repeating myself, but obviously the native token keeps accruing interest and keeps the network secure, while the token, the shadow token in the Cosmos hub that got transferred over maintains the ETH 2.0 value. So network security and interchain liquidity. And let's go back to Bob for security guarantees. Obviously, this is actually not security guarantees, but for hedging purposes. If Bob wants to trade in an event of a prolonged bear market or a very brief up spike, he can essentially react on that without sacrificing network security. He could keep his stake locked and create bATOMs using the Everett zone. And he could just sell those bATOMs on a DEX or maybe even a centralized exchange, but ideally on a DEX. And he can create some form of hedging against prolonged price dips without having to go through the 21-day unbonding period. And that's pretty important because when you're unbonding just to sell, that creates lower security guarantees for the main network. But because you're only selling shadow tokens, the primary token keeps being staked and keeps the network secure. So yeah, network security and stake hedging. And besides that, these are just like two sub-points of what you might be able to do with bATOMs and Everett is leverage staking. So you know how you could create a CDP using ETH, create DAI, sell those DAI, buy more ETH, create more CDPs, make more DAI. Just repeat it until to the point where your collateral is just so high that you don't have any more ETH. You could essentially do the same thing for staking where you can leverage the amount of staking positions that you have by creating bATOMs, selling those bATOMs, creating atoms and staking, and just kind of repeating until to the point where the 10% collateral just reduces what you can do to zero. And interchain staking is also, if there are multiple blockchains connected to the Everett zone, basically you could have atoms staked, create bATOMs, and buy Terra's Luna tokens, which is its staking token, and use those to stake on the Terra network, which means you're essentially being able to do interchain staking with just holding one token. And this is a problem that could apply not just to Cosmos Hub, but it's something that's fairly common in all proof-of-stake networks that has interest rates and staking rewards. So obviously the first one, the big one that we're thinking of is Cosmos Hub. And in the long term, we're also planning on expanding into ETH 2.0 when it comes, and Polkadot also when it comes. And let me give you a brief introduction of who we are. We're actually like a homegrown sort of company right here at Nons. Everyone just met here at Nons, and all of the members either work or live here. So that's our office back there, like the couch. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and we won first place in the Cosmos Hackathon Seoul. So that was pretty cool because it was just an idea before, and the team just decided we should actually try to make something out of this in the hackathon. And we got first prize, so that helped us bootstrap our company. And it says $20,000, but we didn't actually get $20,000 because I think like when we won, it was like $3, and now it's like way lower. So like our seed money just got cut in half, but that's okay. It's been a lot of fun and it still definitely helps. So for us to make this happen, obviously IBC, which is the inner blockchain communication protocol that Cosmos Hub is developing, has to happen. And we're hoping to utilize the protocol layer to build something called interchain accounts. And it's essentially an account on a different hub, or a zone that executes whatever another zone or a blockchain tells you to do. So think of it like a smart contract, but where the smart contract is essentially able to do what a normal account does, but it just does whatever the set of code tells the account to do. This one takes that even further, where the account does whatever this foreign blockchain or a blockchain that's connected to the main blockchain tells you what to do. So we think that would be a pretty cool way to manage staking positions without having to go really deep into the core protocol. So if you're interested on what we're thinking of creating as the first step to creating Everett, always check out GitHub Cosmos, and it's in the ICS repo. And the first issue we put up was the issue 211, and this one is 251, and then we just put up the spec PR at 278. And yeah, and we're writing a couple of blog posts explaining just our logic and what our thoughts are behind this. So this was the first one. The second one should be coming pretty soon, so check it out on our Medium blog. And yeah, this is our researcher Ryan. He spoke at the ETH 2.0 meetup a few days ago, which was pretty cool. And then he went straight to the hospital. He had an operation. But what happened afterwards is even cooler because Vitalik actually came to the hospital to talk about this. So I think we're the first team in the world where Vitalik actually came to the hospital just to see how people were. So I think we take pride in that. So, anyways, we're Everett. You can check our website at everett.zone. Follow us on Twitter, Everett Protocol, and I'm Dojmos. So thank you very much.